They say a person dies twice, once when their heart stops beating, and once when their own child looks at them like a stranger. My heart is still beating, but for my son Mark, I died 3 years ago. Yesterday he walked past me in the grocery store. He looked right through me. No, "Hello, Mom." No, "How are you?" Just a cold, empty stare that told me the woman he married had finally finished her work. She didn't take him away with a suitcase. She took him away with a whisper. And tonight I'm going to tell you exactly what she whispered to turn my own flesh and blood into my greatest enemy. She didn't do it all at once, you see. It wasn't a sudden storm that blew my son away from me. It was a slow, steady rain that washed away everything we had built, brick by brick. It started with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The day Mark brought Sarah home, I felt a chill in my bones that I couldn't explain. I told myself I was just being a protective mother. I was wrong. I sat here last night, eating my dinner alone, and I realized I didn't lose my son to another woman. I lost him to 1,000 tiny whispers. You have to understand how it used to be. Mark wasn't just my son, he was my world. After his father passed away when Mark was only 10, it was just the two of us against everything. We had our own little rituals. Every Friday night was movie night. We'd share a bowl of popcorn, and he'd tell me about his dreams of becoming an architect. He'd say, "Mom, one day I'm going to build you a house with a garden so big you'll never have to buy vegetables again." He was the kind of boy who would notice if I looked tired. He'd make me a cup of tea, always too much sugar, and tell me to put my feet up. "I've got this, Mom," he'd say, and I believed him. When he got his first job, he spent his first paycheck on a pearl necklace for me. I still wear it. It's cold against my skin now, but it's the only thing I have left that feels like the old Mark. He stayed living here for a few years after university. Those were some of the happiest years of my life. We'd talk for hours over breakfast. He'd ask my advice on everything, his career, his friends, his future. "You're the smartest person I know, Mom," he used to tell me. I didn't need to be the smartest. I just wanted to be his anchor. Then he met Sarah. The first year was fine, or so I thought. She was polite. She thanked me for the dinners. She complimented my garden. But looking back, the signs were there. She'd subtly correct the way I spoke. She'd suggest that Mark's old habits, like checking in on me every day, were a bit too much for a grown man. I remember the day Mark stopped calling me during his lunch break. When I asked him about it, he laughed nervously. "Sarah thinks I need to focus more on my networking, Mom. She's probably right." I felt a small prick in my heart, but I brushed it off. I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to have a life of his own. I didn't realize that Sarah didn't want him to have a life with me in it. I poured all my love into him, thinking it was a shield that would protect our bond forever. I didn't know that someone could spend 3 years slowly poisoning the well. The change wasn't a sudden wall. It was more like a fog that slowly rolled in until I couldn't see my son anymore. Sarah started with the suggestions. She'd tell Mark that my house was too cluttered with old memories, or that my advice was a bit outdated for the modern world. I remember the first time Mark snapped at me. I had suggested a specific way to cook the Sunday roast, the way he always loved. He didn't just disagree. He looked at me with a strange, cold annoyance. "Mom, Sarah has a much healthier recipe. Maybe you should try doing things her way for once." The her way became the only way. Then came the holidays. For years, Christmas was here, by the fireplace. But 2 years ago, Sarah decided they needed to start their own traditions. I was invited for exactly 2 hours on Boxing Day. I sat on their expensive sofa, feeling like a stain on their perfect white carpet. Every time I spoke, Sarah would share a look with Mark, a quick, pitying glance that said, "There she goes again." I felt small. I felt like a guest in his life, waiting for permission to speak. Then Mark stopped coming by himself. She was always there, like a shadow. If I asked him a question, she would answer. If I told a story about his childhood, she would interrupt to talk about their future. Slowly, Mark stopped looking me in the eye. It was as if he was afraid that if he looked too closely, he'd remember who we used to be. The breaking point happened last autumn. I had a fall, nothing major, just a slip in the kitchen, but I ended up in the hospital for a night. I called Mark. I needed him. He didn't come for 6 hours. When he finally walked into the hospital room, Sarah was right behind him. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't hold my hand. Instead, he stood at the foot of the bed and spoke words that felt like ice. "Mom, this is exactly what Sarah was worried about. You can't manage on your own. We think it's time to look at assisted living." I looked at Sarah. She was standing in the corner, a faint, victorious smile playing on her lips. She didn't say a word, but her eyes said everything. "I've won." "I'm not going to a home, Mark," I whispered. "I just slipped. It happens." "It's not just the fall, Mom," he replied, his voice sounding rehearsed. "Sarah says you're becoming difficult, obsessive, that you're trying to come between us." That was the lie that broke the camel's back. I had never said a word against her to him. I had eaten my silence for years just to keep him close. But she had spent that same time telling me I was the villain. He chose her lie over my lifetime of truth. He walked out of that room without looking back, and for the first time in 74 years, I felt truly orphaned. After that day in the hospital, the phone stopped ringing altogether. My house became a tomb. I would walk into Mark's old bedroom, touch the architect's desk Arthur had bought him, and feel like I was mourning someone who was still alive. Sarah had successfully convinced him that I was toxic, that I was a threat to their marital peace. But she made one mistake. She underestimated an old woman's memory and her record-keeping. You see, I never was the obsessive or difficult person she described, But I did have a habit Arthur taught me: keep everything. A few weeks ago, I was clearing out my old computer, the one Mark bought me to stay connected. I found a folder of saved voicemails and old video calls from the early days of their marriage. I hadn't listened to them in years. Among them was a recording from a night Mark had accidentally left his phone live in his pocket after calling me. It was 10 minutes of audio. I heard her voice, not the sweet, polite one she used for me, but a sharp, calculating tone. "If we get the house into a trust in your name, we can sell it and move to Spain," I heard her say. "But you have to make him believe she's losing her mind first. If the doctors think she's unstable, she won't be able to fight the sale." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply took that recording to my solicitor. Last week, Mark came over. He looked tired, his eyes hollow. He came to give me one last chance to sign the papers for the assisted living facility. Sarah was waiting in the car, watching from the driveway like a vulture. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just pressed play on the recording. I watched the blood drain from his face. I watched the realization hit him that the woman he had sacrificed his mother for was the same woman who was treating his mother's life like a real estate transaction. "She didn't mean it, Mom," he stammered, but he knew. He saw the cold, hard truth in her own words. I told him to leave. I told him that my house, this museum, was protected by a legal lock he couldn't break. And for the first time in years, he looked at me not with pity, but with a deep, crushing shame. The moral victory didn't bring my son back into this chair. Not yet. He is out there now dealing with the mess of a marriage built on a foundation of lies. He calls sometimes, his voice small, asking if I need anything. I tell him I have everything I need. I've learned that you cannot fight a whisper with a shout. You can only fight it with the truth, and sometimes the truth takes a long time to come home. To the mothers watching this, don't be afraid to set boundaries. Loving your child doesn't mean allowing them to be turned into a weapon against you. Your worth is not defined by how useful you are to their new life. I sit here now, and the silence is different. It's no longer heavy with sadness, it's light with peace. I saved my home, but more importantly, I saved my dignity. We raise them to be men, but we cannot force them to be wise. All we can do is keep our own light burning and hope that one day they remember the way back to the hearth.